Picture this. It's November 20th, 1969.
Roger, that's a good sign.
The 3 astronauts aboard the Apollo 12 have just finished walking on the moon, and they're about to return home. But before they burn their thrusters and get underway, they conduct one final experiment. They jettison their lunar module to safely crash into the moon's surface. This is so that NASA can measure the seismic impact of the crash. No one back at Mission Control was expecting anything unusual, just some boring seismic data. But something unusual is exactly what they got. The moon rang like a giant bell for almost an hour. Regular planets don't do that. It turns out that the moon was hollow. So the most important question about the moon is, where did it come from? How did it get to be in Earth's orbit the way that it is? It's one of those questions that you assume that scientists know the answer to. If you walk up to one, he'll be able to tell you exactly how the moon got there, have a nice little computer model to show you and everything.
Into this long arm of material right here.
But the fact of the matter is that to this day, scientists have no idea how the moon got to be where it is.
They had to come up with a very bizarre theory for how the moon came into being, because all the conventional theories don't make any sense.
This fact actually led one exasperated scientist, a guy named Erwin Shapiro at the Harvard-Smithsonian Institute for Astrophysics, to once say, quote, "The best explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon does not exist." But let's just take a quick look at 2 of the top theories on how the moon got there. The first is called the intact capture theory, and it's basically how it sounds. It means that the moon was formed somewhere else a long time ago, and that it came wandering through the solar system, it got caught in Earth's gravity, and took up position in a nice, perfectly circular orbit around the Earth. Now, there are a number of holes in that theory. Some of them are incredibly complicated and deal with oxygen isotopes being found on moon rocks and that kind of thing that I'm not really qualified to talk about. But the biggest one is that scientists can never make the numbers add up on how a planetoid the size of the moon and the mass of the moon could simply get caught in Earth's gravity in a nice circular orbit the way that it is. It would be like a super tanker gently guiding itself into a port and docking. And the odds of that happening with the moon are a quadrillion to 1, if not worse. The other theory, the one most likely to get cited by scientists today, is called the Big Wack Theory.
The theory states that a Mars-sized body struck the young Earth, and the moon formed from the debris disk around the planet.
Once again, there are a number of problems with this theory. First of all, there's no debris in space that indicates that a collision like that ever took place. But more importantly, the thing that really discredits that is that if a Mars-sized planet, if not bigger, collided with the Earth, it would have dramatically increased the spin rate of the Earth. So the Earth would be spinning like a top right now. And in every computer model, it shows that that's what would happen. So the only way to rectify that is to say that shortly after this one planet crashes into the Earth, yet another planet crashes into the Earth, and this time from the opposite direction, and at just such a speed with just such a force to nullify the increase in speed and send Earth back into like an equilibrium state of like a nice steady spin. Those are the top 2 theories. There's other theories, but those have been discredited even more. Back in the 1960s and 70s, there was this acclaimed science journalist named William Roy Shelton, and he covered the space program. And in his 1970 book, Winning the Moon, he said, quote, "It is important to remember that something had to put the moon at or near its present circular pattern around the Earth. Just as an Apollo spacecraft circling the Earth every 90 minutes while 100 miles high has to have a velocity of roughly 18,000 miles per hour to stay in orbit, so something had to give the moon the precisely required velocity for its weight and altitude. The point, and it is one seldom noted in considering the origin of the moon, is that it is extremely unlikely that any object would just stumble into the right combination of factors required to stay in orbit. Something had to put the moon at its altitude, on its course, and at its speed. The question is, what was that something?" As the Earth orbits the sun, it maintains a constant tilt of 22.5 degrees in relation to the sun's equator. This tilt makes life as we know it on Earth possible. Now that tilt of 22.5 degrees that makes life possible, it is the moon that keeps the Earth at that precise tilt. The moon serves as a giant planetary stabilizer, keeping planet Earth at that perfect tilt of 22.5 degrees. Because of all the instability inside of Earth, all computer models and studies show that the Earth would vary wildly between 0 and 85 degrees if the moon wasn't there. So just think about that for a second. Think of all the anomalous things about the moon in terms of where it came from and its size ratio to Earth, and it also just happens to be the one thing that makes life on Earth possible. The simple equation is no moon equals no humans. What is that, just a coincidence? Here's fellow YouTuber Patrick James laying it out.
If you took the distance between the Earth and the moon and you divided it by the diameter of the moon, you get the number 108. And ironically, if you did the same for the sun, taking the distance from Earth, dividing it by its diameter, you also get the number 108. And because of this ratio, during a solar eclipse, the moon perfectly blocks out the sun to the millimeter, because the moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun and is 400 times closer to Earth than the sun.
That ratio doesn't have to be like that. There's no principle in physics that dictates that that's the way things need to be. It just worked out that way. And the odds of that happening, as many scientists have noted over the years, probably all using the exact same pun, the odds of that happening are astronomical.
The chances of that occurring are so literally astronomically small.
And yet it's there, and it stacks up upon multiple other coincidences. Would you like some more? The Earth rotates 366 times for every orbit around the sun. But it just so happens that the Earth is exactly 366% bigger than the moon. Another way of saying that is that the moon is 27.322% the size of the Earth. The moon orbits the Earth exactly every 27.322 days. What are the odds? I'm sure it's a coincidence. Just like how the moon drifted perfectly into Earth orbit at exactly the right speed and angle and the perfect size with the perfect mass to maintain the Earth at the perfect tilt of 22.5 degrees to make life possible. I'm sure that's all just a total coincidence that those numbers all line up like that. The moon orbits the Earth 366 times every 10,000 days. Now there's that number, 366 again. And 10,000, a nice, clean base 10 number. Not 9,962, or not even 10,003. No, 10,000 on the dot. Now 10,000 also pops up again because the speed at which the Earth orbits the sun is exactly 1/10,000th the speed of light. It's like these numbers are trying to tell you something. It's like they're a code. And it's important to note that no other planet in our solar system enjoys these types of ratios. It's not like the same thing happens with Mars or with Venus or Jupiter, right? No. Only the Earth, Sun, and Moon have these anomalous ratios and oddities about them. Why would that be? And it just so happens, of course, that the Earth is the only planet with life on it. It's like it's all adding up to something. But what? Well, it's all adding up to a question. Who built the moon? Now, it seems that the reason why they put it there was to essentially act as an incubator for intelligent life. Now, why they would want to do that, it's anyone's guess. But what type of civilization has the capability of doing something like that? Well, now we get to something called the Kardashev scale. This is a method used for measuring a civilization's technological advancement by looking at the amount of energy it's capable of consuming. So it proposes 3 levels. The Type 1 civilization can use all the energy that an entire planet can provide. Earth, therefore, is not yet a Type 1 civilization, but could be in the next 100 years or so. A Type 2 civilization can directly harness all the energy of an entire star. This is where you get the idea of a Dyson sphere, which is a mega structure that's constructed around a star. And as you can see, it's a pretty crazy looking thing. The Type 3 civilization is able to capture all the energy emitted by an entire galaxy. So think of it this way, the idea that someone could construct the moon, something that big and natural looking, seems crazy to us. But if you were a Type 2 civilization capable of building something like a Dyson sphere, well, then building something like the moon would be a walk in the park. And there's that great quote by the science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke where he said, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." So from that perspective, building something like the moon isn't that inconceivable. It just seems like that to us today. But just remember, the device that you're watching this video on, if you took it back 1,000 years ago, it would look nothing short of godlike to the people then. So imagine what kind of technologies will be available 1,000 years from now, or 1,000,000 years from now, or God, 1,000,000,000 years from now. So the idea that a Type 2 or Type 3 civilization actually built and put the moon where it is today for a specific purpose, it's actually not that crazy. And remember how I mentioned at the start that the moon rang like a bell and might be hollow? Well, there are a couple other oddities about that. So the Apollo missions brought back over 800 pounds in moon rocks. And as you can imagine, those rocks got analyzed to death, right? They did every study they could possibly do to those rocks. And they found some really unusual things. One of the most unusual that they found is that the rocks on the surface of the moon are older than the rocks beneath them. This is opposite to what it should be. Like if you're on Earth, the further down you dig, the older the rocks become. But it's the opposite on the moon. The old stuff is on the very top, and as you dig down, it gets younger. But that's not the only thing. The radioactive elements, uranium-236 and neptunium-237, those were both found on the moon. Now here's the thing about those. Those do not occur naturally. On Earth, we have to create those. We have to make those as part of a nuclear program. How the heck did they get on the moon? The explanation for that would be that the moon was constructed, that someone took a planetoid and essentially hollowed it out, or at least carved really large cavities within it, and used probably a nuclear process to do that. So there's that one idea, the idea that a Type 2 or Type 3 civilization in the very distant past constructed the moon and put it into Earth's orbit specifically for the purpose of incubating intelligent life. That's one theory. Now the only other theory that I can come up with would be simulation theory. This is the idea that we're all living out our lives inside of a computer program, and the Type 2 or Type 3 super advanced civilization of the past is actually an overweight computer programmer sitting at his desk in base reality.
It would seem to follow that the odds that we're in base reality is 1 in billions.
But either way, whether it's simulation theory or a super advanced civilization in the distant past, either way, the moon was constructed for the purpose of making human life possible on Earth. How freaking wild is that? So the story of the moon is essentially a story of ridiculous coincidences. You see, when one thing happens where the odds of it happening are 1,000,000,000 to 1, you can still get away with saying it was a freak occurrence. But when a dozen or more things happen, each with 1,000,000,000 to 1 odds, and they all happen right in a row for a specific purpose, well then you gotta at least scratch your head and say, what the heck is going on? You gotta be a little bit curious. If you're not curious about that, you're insane. Think about it, what kind of a homicide detective would you be if just one insane coincidence after another kept piling up in your case and you're like, it's a coincidence. There's nothing going on there. No, you'd be a terrible detective, right? And you'd never actually solve the case. You'd probably get the wrong guy. In this case, it would be the wrong theory as to how the moon got there. Now, I understand that plenty of people don't like these kinds of questions, and they don't like these kinds of theories. Now, you can bury your head in the sand all you like, but when the coincidences like these are actually math, they don't just go away. I mean, 2 + 2 continues to equal 4 no matter how much you refuse to look at it. So at some point, you have to deal with it and start asking those uncomfortable questions. Now, if you're around other people and you're embarrassed and you think they're gonna laugh at you if you say something about the moon being artificial, just remember this. There was a time when if you said that the Earth was round, you would have gotten laughed right out of the room. Some priest would have punched you in the face. Because I guarantee you, like 100 years from now, people are gonna be saying, well, of course somebody else built the moon. It's obvious, just look at it. Don't you wanna be the guy that was ahead of his time, instead of just some schmuck who was saying what everyone else was saying because he didn't wanna get laughed at? Right? So my advice is to get interested in this, get curious, and do your own research. I guarantee you, you will be shocked at what you find. I know I was. I didn't know any of this stuff about the moon. I didn't. And I started reading about it, it blew me away. So even if someone does laugh at you, someone walks up with an incredulous look on their face and says, well, you don't really believe that aliens built the moon, do you? I'll tell you what you can do. You can look that guy right in the eye, and you can tell him it's possible.